So I know that there's a lot of programmers like you out there who are watching these videos who are trying to get into the software industry, and you're noticing that it's becoming more and more competitive. And it is true, because there's a lot of people who are trying to get into the software industry, and so I decided to make a video about how to stand out as a programmer. So I'm going to be giving you 7 tips on how to stand out. And these tips come from my personal experience after 10 plus years in the software development industry. And I'm going to be sharing some of my story, some of the mistakes that I've made, and also some observations that I've observed from other good programmers and what really made them stand out. So my name's Henrik, and I'm here to help you learn the foundations of software development. So let's get started. By the way, if you're in the early stages of your programming journey, I've got a special gift for you. It's called my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And it's a guide that will take you from no coding experience to building your first 4 projects. And the best part is it's free. It's a free gift to you. In this coding challenge, I guide you in 30 days to build 4 programming projects, and I give you some tutorials that are in C. But of course, these projects are really generic and really beginner friendly, and so you can actually code them in different programming languages. You can still benefit from this guide because you can just take the principles that are in my challenge and then apply them to your programming language. You can find the challenge in the link in the description, and if you download it and pay attention to what it says, you'll definitely learn some fundamental programming concepts that will give you a good foundation to your software development journey. Alright, so the first tip is passion beyond profit. So if you're going to be coding, you need to be in it not just for the money, but also you need to have a passion, or you need to have some sort of motivation that goes beyond just money for learning how to code. When you're learning how to code, building projects, applying for internships, and applying for jobs, doing job interviews, you'll eventually run into situations where you're going to get frustrated and feel stuck. And you need something more than just money that will help carry you through those frustrating times. For me, when I first started learning how to code, I started learning how to code in a TI-83 calculator. And with that calculator, I was only like 12 years old, 13 years old. And the reason why I was coding in that calculator was because I loved creating video games. And growing up, I loved video games. So I wanted to make my own video games that I could play in school. And when I started learning how to code, it gave me a lot of new ideas on things that I can build as games. And so naturally, I was really hooked into coding these video games in my calculator. Now, obviously, I wasn't doing it for money. I was 12 or 13 years old at that time. So I was really doing it just for fun. And I loved showing people the games that I was creating. And so if you have this kind of mentality when it comes to coding, then that will really help you build more and more projects and carry you through that frustration. Something I will say though is that it is okay if money is the main reason why you're coding, but you need to think of what is that money going to do for you. Is it because you want a better work-life balance? Is it because you want to help provide for your family? So you need to have these kinds of things in mind when you're learning how to code. You come into these frustrating times. Come back to those motivations on why you started learning how to code, and then that's what's going to help you overcome those frustrations. All right, tip number 2 is resourcefulness. You need to be able to be resourceful, find the resources that you need, because when you're learning how to code, you'll inevitably come into situations that you've never faced before. And even me, as I've been in the programming field for 10 plus years, I'm always running into situations that I don't know what to do. And so I have to look for resources online and Google a lot. And you'll notice that as a programmer, you're going to be doing a lot of Googling, trying to figure out how to get something to work. And that's part of resourcefulness. And that's how I was able to learn multiple programming languages. It's when I was building these projects, working on these projects in my companies, and then they would ask me to code in these languages, and then I would have to look up tutorials online on how to build those things that my company was asking for, to complete those tasks that my company was asking for. I needed to be resourceful. And resourceful doesn't mean just looking for resources online, but knowing the right people to ask. So when I was working in my companies, I would know different individuals, make connections with different people, and try to see what things that they're good at, what things that they're an expert at. And then I would go to those people whenever I had problems in my code. And I was able to develop a lot of relationships with more mentors and more programming mentors. And so whenever I was stuck, I would be able to tap one of them. And whenever I would need help with my programming project. I've worked with many different programming students starting from the time that I was in university. I was a TA or an undergraduate teaching fellow, and I was helping teach the programming class in my university. And something that I noticed is that there's two kinds of students. There's the students who they would get stuck and then they wouldn't ask for help and then they would just sit in their stuckness. But then there's the other students who would go online, they would like search up how to do different things, and then they would be able to come up with solutions that we haven't even taught them in the course. And so I thought those students really stood out to me because they were resourceful. And not only that, but even the ones who would come to the office hours, I really commend them because they're taking advantage of the resources that they have in the university rather than just staying stuck in their whatever issues that they're running into. This resourcefulness leads me to my third point, which is having a teachable attitude. And when I was graduating from university, the only programming language that I knew was C. And so when I went to my first job, they were planning to get me to code in a lot of different programming languages, but they noticed that I had a teachable attitude. And that's really the thing that entry-level programmers are really known for. This is the thing that makes them valuable, is that they're very teachable. And so I was very teachable, very young, and so my company hired me even though I only knew how to code in C. When I got to the company, they taught me how to code in Python, C++, Java, and JavaScript. And then when I went to my next company, when I switched jobs, I knew all these programming languages. And then what did they ask me to code in? They asked me to code in C#. And so it's really interesting because they eventually hired me to code in a programming language that I told them that I had no experience in. But they were okay with that because they noticed that I had a teachable attitude. So they knew I had a teachable attitude, and they knew that it doesn't really matter that I don't know the language. It just matters that I'm able to learn. And then they can just teach me and I can just pick it up on the job. This is not just true in my journey, but also in a lot of other programmers that I know. They often would come into a job or an internship. They have no experience in the programming language, but the company noticed that they had a teachable attitude, and so they would be able to bring them in and help them learn. And something that my dad always taught me was when I would go into a job interview, and he said, this is what he told me. He said, if they ask you if you know how to do something, don't just say that you don't know. You can say that, you can be honest and say that you don't know, but don't try to make it up and pretend that you know it. Just say honestly that you don't know it, but that you're willing to learn. And so that's what I did in my job interviews. They would ask me if I knew something, and then I would just say, yeah, I don't know how to do that, but I'm willing to learn and understand how to do those things. Something else I want to point out about teachable attitude is that even if you do know the programming language, when you get to the company, they're going to ask you to look at a code base, and that requires some teaching as well. They need to ramp you up and get you up to date, or get you really to understand how the code base works. So that takes a learning curve as well. And so they really need programmers who have a teachable attitude, because they're going to give you a code base that they're going to have to teach you anyways. And so that teachable attitude is so key for a programmer. All right, the fourth tip is solid theoretical knowledge. And as I've been coding for 10 plus years, like I keep saying, you'll start to notice a lot of themes when it comes to programming. Like there's a back end, there's a front end, there's a user interface, there's a database, there's some sort of UI component, there's APIs, there's frameworks and listeners, and all these kinds of themes. If you're into object-oriented programming, there are these objects, and there's structs if you're coding in C. And so you'll start to notice these common themes. And the important part about programming is understanding these common themes, these common theories or theoretical knowledge. And the coding syntax where you actually code is not really that important, because like for me, even though I've been coding for 10 plus years, I often look up the code syntax for programming languages that I haven't touched in a while. So like if I haven't coded in Python in a while, I'll look up the Python syntax, or like if I haven't coded in C or like whatever programming language, then I would just look up the syntax online. But I do know the theoretical knowledge. I know that you can do certain things in certain programming languages. I know that some programming languages are better than others for certain tasks. And so that's the most important part, is having that theoretical knowledge. Now, the other part I want to mention about theoretical knowledge, and like I keep saying, like, programming is actually the easy part. The hard part is applying or putting an idea in your head, like a human idea, and then translating that into programming language, translating that into a computer language so that the computer can understand what you want to do and be able to do what you want it to do. And so that takes a lot of theoretical knowledge. And not just in terms of the theoretical knowledge of how to translate into a computer language, but also the theoretical knowledge of the product that you're developing as well. And so if you're developing a product that's going to be used by nurses or doctors, it's good to have that theoretical knowledge of the medical industry. Or like, I have one student who is a desk clerk and he works in hospitality at a hotel. And so just having that background knowledge of the use cases that they would run into at that hotel, that gives him a lot of good theoretical knowledge on what he can implement or what he can code up for his hotel. So you need to be thinking about this question is, what is the human idea that this program is implementing? What is the thing that's in here that you're translating into computer language? And once you're able to have that good theoretical knowledge, then you can translate that into a computer language. And you need to have that good theoretical knowledge of the computer as well to be able to make good design decisions for your programming project. So my industry is digital signal processing, and that's the theory that we're applying in our programs. And so I need to have a good theoretical knowledge of what we're doing with these digital signals and how they're going to be communicated, how they're going to be encoded, and all these kinds of things in order to be able to program well. If I don't have that background, that good solid theoretical background, then I'm going to have a hard time understanding what I'm doing with my program. And like I said, the programming part is the easy part. The hard part is the theory, the theoretical ideas in here that you're trying to implement. This leads me to my fifth tip. How do you get that good theoretical knowledge? You get it through relevant experience. And that's how I got my first job. I had an internship in information assurance or cybersecurity. And so I had that internship. I went to the career fair at my school and I handed them my resume. And then my company that I was going to get my first job in, they looked at my resume and they saw the internship that I had. And then I saw them, they circled the internship, and then they called me later that week. And so that's how I was able to get my first job, because I had relevant experience. And they saw that I had experience in information assurance, and so they offered me a job in networks and security. So that was the first field that I went into, networks and security. And they saw that I had my degree. I had a degree in electrical engineering. So they saw my degree, they saw this internship that I had, and so I had the good theoretical knowledge and theoretical experience, and so they pulled me in and offered me my first job. This is why internships are so important, because when you apply for a job, they can see that internship and they have some sort of confidence that you've had professional experience before and you can actually make a contribution to projects that are in their field. And so it gets your foot in the door in that industry. And so having that internship is really key to give you that relevant experience that employers are looking for. I want to go back to when I mentioned about my student. So one of my students is a front desk clerk at a hotel. And so I'm not just talking about software experience, but even his experience as a front desk clerk, he could even leverage that for other jobs in the hospitality industry. So in the hospitality industry, if they need a software developer to make programs for hotels or front desk clerks or that industry in general, and every industry is starting to get more and more digital, so this is going to be more and more needed. But say a hotel needs a software developer, he already understands the use cases, he already understands the culture of the hotel, of how hotel management works, and so he could easily jump in with his software experience and his hotel management experience combined, and he can make a good contribution to that team. All right, tip number 6 is projects showing progression. And what I mean by that is being able to do projects that are increasing in complexity, increasing in scale. And that's because if you just program the same programming projects over and over again, and you're not really challenging yourself, you're not really going to grow as a programmer. It's kind of like if you're doing math problems. I remember when I was like 5 years old, 4 years old, and I was doing math problems and doing like 4 plus 4, 5 plus 5, and I do all these math problems, but I wasn't really growing in my mathematics, right? It was only when I started to learn other new theoretical math concepts that I was able to grow as a mathematician. So likewise with programming, you need to be able to move on from the basic concepts that you've learned and start going into more complex concepts. It's also like another analogy I like to use is like it's like going to the gym. If you go to the gym and you just lift the same exact weights every time and you don't increase your weights, then you're not going to get stronger. You need to be able to challenge yourself, right? So likewise with programming, you need to have projects that are not, they don't all just look the same or the same level of difficulty. You need to up it up every time you do a programming project and be able to challenge yourself. And that's how you're able to become an expert at programming. All right, my last and final tip, my 7th tip, and thank you for sticking to this point. My last tip is strong collaborative skills. So when you join a company and you're going to do some coding for that company, you're not going to be coding on your own unless it's a startup, but usually it's not a startup. It's going to be your first job. So when you go into your first programming job, they're going to ask you to code with a team. And so you have to learn how to code on the same code base with that team, which probably involves using Git. And if you want to learn how to use Git to collaborate with other people, you can watch this video. But all that to say is you're going to be collaborating with people. You're going to be collaborating on a team. And so you're going to have to learn how to code with other people and write code that other people can understand, and also coordinate with people. A lot of the tasks in my job is integrating my code with someone else's code. And so we code our individual parts, but then we go into the lab, we do our testing together, and we try to see how our parts go to fit together, and we iron out those problems, those kinks where there's a miscommunication between our code bases. So collaboration is really key. It's funny, when I first got into the software industry, I thought I had the advantage because I could easily work remotely. And this is something that I told a lot of people. I can easily work remotely because all my tasks are just on a computer. And then the pandemic came, and then we were all working from home. And then when the pandemic was over, we all went back to the office, and I noticed that my peers, my friends who are in other industries, they're still working from home, and I'm the one who started going back to the office. And I thought that was kind of strange. Like, why is it that I'm the one who's going back to the office, but they're the ones who are staying home? And I noticed it's because my company, we do pretty well in person. When we interact with one another, we have spontaneous conversations in the hallways. We have a lot of collaboration, like I mentioned. We have a lot of discussions. And so all these spontaneous discussions, these spontaneous meetings helps us to make code that flows well, and we can iron out a lot of things faster than just going on Zoom and talking about these things. So this is one of the reasons why I still go to the office, even though I could just work from home. It's just a lot easier to work collaboratively in person. And so you need to have good collaborative skills to really stand out as a programmer. I think a subcategory of strong collaborative skills is good people skills. I know this one guy who he didn't have any background in software development. He just did a boot camp about web development, and then he was able to get a job. And I asked him, how are you able to get the job? And he told me that one of the things that really helped him stand out was that he has good people skills. So he has good sociable skills. He's able to communicate well with other people and collaborate, like I mentioned, and just have conversations with people and make sure that communication is clear and everyone understands what's going on. So because of that, he was able to get his job. And on the flip side of that, that's one of the reasons why I think I didn't get a job, because I went to this one interview and then they were interviewing me. They're trying to see if I can communicate well with them. And looking back, I realized that I didn't communicate well enough to them, because they were asking me a lot of social questions, like things about my resume that didn't have anything to do with programming. And so I was kind of thrown off by that. Like, why are they asking me about some miscellaneous things that have nothing to do with programming? But I was informed later that it's because they just wanted to have a conversation with me. They just wanted to interact and have a personal conversation with me and try to get to know me. And so that's when I realized that company fit is also important. And so if you want to stand out, you need to have good social skills, good ways of talking with people, and being able to have a good conversation, like a personal conversation with someone. That would also really help you stand out as a programmer. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because as a programmer, we tend to just think that we're just going to be dealing with computers all the time, and maybe that's why you want to do programming, because you only have to work with computers, you don't have to interact with people. But when it comes to programming, if you want to be successful, if you want to stand out, if you really want to make some good contributions at your company, you need to know how to deal with people as well. All right, so those are the 7 tips: passion beyond profit, resourcefulness, teachable attitude, solid theoretical knowledge, relevant experience, projects showing progression, and strong collaborative skills. All right, now that's a lot of tips, right? I gave you a lot of tips. Which one of these tips really helped you out the most, or which one of them stood out the most to you? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any other tips about how to stand out as a programmer, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. What you think really helps people stand out as programmers. All right, like I mentioned earlier, if you're just starting off in your programming journey and you don't know where to start, you can download my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And it's a 30-day guide where I teach you how to build those 4 beginner programming projects. It's really beginner friendly, and I go step by step on how to build each one and go through the tutorials that you need to build each one. So download that in the link in the description. All right, that's it for this week's video. I hope it really helped you out and helped you think about how you can stand out as a programmer, and helped you give you some ideas on what you can improve on. And if it did help you out, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know in the comment section, and I'll be sure to answer you there. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.